eye for an eye means everyone ends up blind. And that's what we've been doing since time remembered. Can we stop is the most important question. But perhaps a more important question is, can we stop in time? Hello, I'm Clark Peters, and I'm here to take you on a journey. Together, we will look behind the curtain that covers politics and power. We will see for ourselves the results of corruption and war, and we will see the reality of the struggle of human beings, the struggle for more than just the body, the struggle for the survival of the spirit, the struggle for life itself. The world is in trouble. We all know that somehow, even if we manage not to think about it most of the time. We hear news about uprisings and mayhem and torture. We hear about cyclones and earthquakes and panic. No longer a now and then thing. This is the news every day. We hear about the common man banding together and trying to overthrow corrupt governments, trying to take power back and put it into the hands of the people. If we live in the West, we don't really think anything can happen to us. It will always be other people, other countries, other problems, or so we think. We feel safe in our quiet suburb with good schools and the giant supermarkets and everything going on as usual. Even if we do complain about the government and the taxes, we feel somehow invulnerable. But for most of us, deep down, where we don't have to look it in the face, there is an uneasy feeling. Enough has happened in the world so that we all know how fragile our imagined safety is. We know, even when we don't want to know, how quickly our lifestyle can change. Most of us remember something. Maybe it was just a long time without electricity, or a strike somewhere that meant no fresh food was delivered, or water was in short supply. We remember how quickly the supermarket shelves emptied as people stocked up to feel safe. We remember the way people who were normally polite and friendly snatched canned goods before someone else could get them. And we know, like it or not, how quickly life can turn into a matter of every man for himself. That veneer of civilization is easily torn away.
It all relates to human beings, but there are those who are greedy and they will take wealth and there is very little wealth. There are those who will take resources and there are very little resources to be spread between many different people. There are those who will take power and will not share power. So it's human beings who cause a lot of problem, and sometimes it is also nature.
All it takes is a little fear. And fear, well, that's what power is, isn't it? Being able to strike fear into the heart of another and letting them know that you can fill them with fear, that you have the power to do it, even when it's just a threat. Power over another. That's it.
Governments want power. They want money. And many countries are developing, not in the way that we would want them to become a developed nation, but they're developing this great disparity between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. And that creates tremendous unrest and a worse world than the world that we might have had when things were peaceful centuries ago.
Now, we could say that, in a way, the traumas go back generations. They go back to the generations of people who were in Auschwitz, the people who suffered terribly in the Second World War. It goes back to the traumas of people who were removed from their lands as a result of this conflict, and the suffering that has gone on for 6 decades now. It needs healing at a very, very deep level.
But time heals all things, doesn't it? Yes, it was truly terrible when the Christians were thrown to the lions. And before that, there was Alexander in Greece invading Persia and India. The Chinese building that great wall to protect them from the Mongols. Then, of course, Nero played the fiddle while Rome burned. And there were the wars to end all wars. World War I. And then II. And may we be spared III. Because there won't be a IV, not with the weapons available now. And time, that great healer. Countries occupied through time. Wars fought, people subjugated. But time does heal, doesn't it? That's what we're told. But if time were enough, then memory would fade, and no one would seek retribution or revenge. But countries and their leaders, people and their wounds of the spirit, don't forget.
The trauma and the impact of the trauma generates a reaction over 7 generations. That means it really passes on to your children and children to the next 7 generations.
Using the guns and the weapon to eliminate each other will never happen, because if they kill me, my son will be there. If they kill my son, my grandson will be there. If they kill my grandson, my great-great-grandson will be there. It would be impossible.
Time may turn events into stories told to the next generation. But the events are never erased. And the desire for revenge and retribution travels down the years. Time alone is never the answer.
Killing each other will never solve the problem, will never make the issue go away. If Israel think if they kill all the Palestinians, they can solve the problems, I think they are making a big mistake. And if the Arab kill all the Jew, they think they are solving the problems, I think it's a big mistake.
300 million people have died, more than that, in these conflicts. And just even today, this moment, there are 85 conflicts going on around the world as we speak.
Wars fought in the name of freedom result in human beings building more prisons than ever. Wars fought in the name of religion result in people disobeying the very laws, rules, precepts, and commandments their religions asks of them.
When are we going to realize what's happening in this world? Let's not let few people hijack religion or hijack humanity and kill in the name of God. God doesn't want anybody to kill in His name. God says if you save one life, you save the whole world. If you kill one life, you kill the whole world.
Wars fought in the name of peace result in humanity actually forgetting that in war, peace is the very first casualty. And the enemy? Well, the enemy changes with the politics of the time. And war hides under many names, from rebellion to revolution, from intervention to invasion. Whether it is an uprising or just a skirmish, war is war. And it is always, always about power.
Power is control.
The ability to act and create the consequence you want.
Power should be in the hands of the people.
A tremendous amount of responsibility comes with power for any individual.
Is having influence, whether it's influence over a group of people, a country.
A tool, but in the wrong hands, it can really do some damage.
Power can be positive and power can be negative.
I think it can also be the art of persuasion and influencing.
God Almighty, He's got plenty of power. Power can be used for great good and great evil.
The amount of money that the world is spending on weapons is obscene. You know that in the OECD countries, for every $1 we spend on preventing violent conflict, we spend $1,885 on weaponry and war, preparing for war. It's crazy. It's completely crazy.
And power is often about money. In war of all kinds, there are people who manipulate the results of war to make money. A lot of money. Everything is up for sale. Weapons, food, information, even people. Power alone holds no morality. Power alone has no sense of mission, no compassion, no anger.
And many people say, at times power corrupts. And when you have the absolute power, it corrupts absolutely.
I totally agree. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
This power that corrupts us too, if we want to grab power. How can we keep clean hands?
It's not the power we need to be afraid of. It's us. As George Bernard Shaw said, power does not corrupt man. It is fools in a position of power who corrupt power.
You know, in the whole world, the politicians are the ones, to me, who have literally created more problems than bringing peace to the world. Even the leaders these days can mislead them into bigger problems.
All that is left is pain and suffering, and at best, the desperate internal search for a way to cope with the loss of self that seems to happen. But is that truly all that's left? Or is it just at first glance that it looks like hope is gone? This question needs an answer. For it is still the common man, the many, who are at risk. It is the many who are punished for all kinds of things they are not responsible for. And the many, well, that's us. It's you, and it's me. Look around. We can no longer pretend that it's other people who are in danger. Because as long as some of us are, all of us are. We are about to see the results of power imposed on people. We will see how force is used by those in power to take whatever they want, so that there is no free will left, no choices. Even here, where the grandeur of the country itself seems to call out freedom, where the waterfalls drop with magnificence and the light holds an unearthly beauty, where the smiles of the people speak freedom, and the animals of all kinds run, unfettered and filled with joy of living, where the music beats with the very rhythm of life. Now we will hear from Brahma Kumaris, one of the survivors of a terrible violence in his home country. He is now living in an IDP camp outside Nakuru. He is one of the survivors of horrors of that time. No words can be as powerful as his own, no memories as raw.
My name is Brahma Kumaris. Before we came here, it is when the presidential election, they announced who won the elections in 2007. And we found that President Kibaki was already, he won. They announced that he won, who was in PNU. And the ODM guys also were saying they won the elections. So everything erupted in the country. We found the tribal clashes came in. It moved all over Kisumu, Eldoret, Kericho, Nairobi, Kibera. And when it came last, we were the ones who were affected because we were in Nakuru. We were welcoming people from Kisumu. They were coming to Nakuru because it was a peaceful town. And when they came in, they realized, they started talking to their people, their tribes. Why are you sitting here with these people? And they have beaten us in the other sides, in the other towns where we have come from. So that grievance began to rise up, the hatred began to rise up. And they camped together, the group called Mungiki. And they organized something we call ethnic cleansing. And they started now revenge. They planned secretly And when it happened, we were caught. So they came out with pangas, with rungus. And even some of them were hired by the government. They were given even the uniform. Like in Nakuru, we were being beaten. We were being killed and cut. And yet the policemen were there watching with the guns. And they were there saying, go fight, and let's see who will win. And you could run to the police thinking he will help you, but you find he shoots you up. We didn't know where to run to. And the last minute, this is my story, when it came to us on the ground, my brother was having a hotel, a business of hotel in Pondamali. This is where I lost my brother. They removed him from the hotel and told him, we go kill other tribes if you are on our side. And he said, no, I'm born again, I love Jesus Christ. I cannot kill my brother, I cannot do anything like that. And I'm not ethnic, I'm not on your side. And then they said, okay, so you mean you're not on our side? Then let's go. And little did my brother know that they went to bring people to kill him. And most of them were their friends. He said, me, I have nothing to do with the election. I have nothing to do with up there. I just voted. And they said, oh, you said you're not on our side. Then somebody came with an axe from the crowd of the youth and cut him here. It was a very big hole like this. It went deep. I remember when he died, I came down. We tried. He was cut when he wanted to go to the hotel. The guys in the hotel who were eating the hotel had closed the door. He couldn't go in. He tried to go through the gate. Another lady of the other tribe had closed the gate. And then he fell outside the gate. When he fell down, they came, they took all the money. He was bleeding. When he could do, when the blood could come here like a river. It could just come here like a river. And then he was moving. It was a very heavy voice of a man. Oh, it was so scary. And the wife and the children were inside. The wife was pregnant and 3 other kids. They were hiding under the bed. It was worse. With no help, nothing to turn to. The Red Cross, then there was nothing outside. There were policemen who were on the other side of the other tribe, and they were just supporting the other guys to kill other tribes. And then a friend of ours who was on the other tribe, he called in the house, come, we have a car outside here. You can bring him and then we take him to the hospital. When they reached the fence, they found there was no car and there were those guys. And those guys came very fast. And they ran with the body of my brother. He was still breathing. Found an open house. They pushed him inside, put on the seat, sofa set. And then the guys came again, broke that door, and they hit him, took the cushion, seat cushion, put it here, and they murdered him completely on the blood. It was painful. It was hard. My brother was dead there. My sister-in-law came out, went to the landlord and asked her, where is the body of my husband? Even if he's dead, let me take the body to the mortuary. Now, that's where the tension was. Many people died in Nakuru. From where we live in Pondamali, if you could go the whole way, even dogs were eating the bodies of people. The pigs were eating. Because they could cut somebody and cut a goat and take the head of the goat and put it on the human's body. It was hard. You could find legs and hands separated. It was chaos. It was hard. We are dying here because we have the truth. And nobody has ever come here even to ask what we went through. My brother was murdered and justice has never been done up to today. Afterwards, we went to bury home. People cried over it. When we came back, my sister-in-law, when she gave birth, because of the trauma, the child stayed for 7 months and the child died. My brother just is murdered, and then we come here and we are going back home, burying the child again on the side of the grave of my brother. It was hell, I mean. I remember standing in the crowd at home saying, as much as you have gone through all this, God has a purpose and a reason. And there the scripture that I love most in the Bible says that give thanks in everything, even if it pains. God, you know. I hated them so much, it was painful. But I reached a place and told God I have to let go and life has to move on. We have survived all through because of the grace of God. As you can see, He came with you. I didn't see any policemen. I didn't see anybody from the government because He cares for us and we love Him. May well-wishers or anybody who's watching this film, if God can speak to your heart, if God can touch you, whatever you can do to these people who were affected, to these people who went through post-election violence, God will really bless you. Our cry is on God. We thank God. We thank God.
Somehow, through the unimaginable pain, still this man reached a place where he reached out for God and began to let go of the hatred. And no place is immune, no matter how seemingly important. And in another place in the world, there was a different kind of beauty. Times Square still glittered and Broadway shows opened. Children played in the water and tourists wandered the magnificent city. Wall Street stood firm, and the Statue of Liberty still held her torch high. But then, and what was it that really happened on the 81st floor of the South Tower on the 9/11? That day the world will long remember. What was it that brought Stanley Premnath and Brian Clark together, changing things so dramatically, so improbably?
My name is Brian Clark from Mahwah, New Jersey. On 9/11, my commute was absolutely normal. It was a beautiful blue sky day, much like today. Got a cup of coffee and a sweet roll and just sort of went once around the trading floor. Everything was fine, and I went back to my office and began pecking away at my keyboard, emails and spreadsheets and so on.
My name is Stanley Premnath. I live in Valley Stream in Long Island. On that day, 9/11, I worked at Fuji Bank Limited on the 81st floor on the South Tower. There was nothing indifferent about that day. I drove from Elmont, stopped in the same bagel store, pick up a raisin bagel and a cup of coffee. The same thing I ate for 13 years working at the Trade Center. I took the local elevator, went to the 81st floor, walked into the office. One lady is making copies at the copier. I always carried my Bible and it was always on top of my desk. Still having my briefcase in one hand and my brown bag in the other hand with a bagel and the coffee, the phone rang and my mother is on the phone. Stan, are you okay? I'm fine. My brothers, Steve, Paul, Bill, they took turns in asking me the same question. Stan, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm saying to myself, it's not even 9 o'clock, and there's a lot of love here.
And at 8:46, there was an enormous double boom, that double explosion. Well, I had been trained by the Port Authority since the 1993 bombing to be one of the fire safety marshals on our floor. I grabbed the flashlight that they had provided, put a whistle around my neck that they had provided, In other parts of the floor, our traders had noticed something in the tower next door and had run to the north windows and looked up 9 floors and saw there was this ring of fire all the way around the 93rd floor in the north tower. Within minutes, already our people lined up against the north windows were seeing some individuals start to jump. A terrible sight.
And a young lady is coming towards me, and as she's coming towards me, she is saying, "Stan, take a look. What is happening out there? We don't know what is happening, but we saw huge chunks of fireballs just coming down from the sky." So we ran out of the office, and here we are back in the elevator, and we're down. And the security guard looks at me and says, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I saw fireballs coming down. I'm going home."
Just before I came out of my office, the strobe lights flashed, the siren gave a little whoop whoop, and a very familiar voice came over the public address system, and the announcement was, "Your attention, ladies and gentlemen, Building 2 is secure. If you are in the midst of evacuation, you may use the re-entry doors and the elevators to return to your offices."
And I made that decision to go back there, the door closed, and we were zoomed back up, and then went back into the office, and the phone is ringing all over again. And this time it's a young lady from Chicago. "Stan, get out. Get out for what, Stan? We don't have time. Stan, you're not logged on the computer. Stan, you're not looking at the monitor. Stan, you're not listening to the radio." No. You tell me why. I'm a logical-minded person. You tell me why I have to get out, and I will go. "Stan, we don't have the time. Please, Stan. Please, get out."
I found myself talking to a fellow named Bobby Call. And so he and I were just a yard apart having a pleasant conversation.
And still standing up with that phone in my hand, not looking any place in particular, my eyes caught something from the south side coming from the direction of the Statue of Liberty towards the building. At first it looks like a speck, and it's getting bigger by the split seconds. And I can hear this revving sound of that gray plane coming towards me, eye level eye contact. And as this plane is coming closer, I can hear the sound, this revving engine. And all I remember doing just before impact, I dove under the desk and said, "Lord, you take over." And the plane with the most thunderous sound slammed into the building.
And in a split second, our floor just fell apart, if you like. Everything came out of the ceiling. Speakers, air conditioning ducts, lights, anything that was up in the ceiling fell. The entire ceiling grid came down.
The only desk that stood firm was a desk that I was hiding under. My Bible was on top of that desk. And every wall was flattened. Every piece of furniture looks like matchsticks.
In that instant, I knew it was terrorism. And for the next 10 seconds, really, they were the only 10 seconds where I felt out of control that day. And whether it happened or not, I don't know. But the sensation I had was that the whole building moved 6 to 8 feet toward the Hudson River. And it stopped, and then it came back to vertical. And then with a bit of a jerk, it stood at vertical. I know this may sound strange, but at that instant, I knew I was fine. I had this sense of confidence that I could now control my actions.
You see, that height that we worked there on 81st floor, planes flew at the same altitude. And what you didn't see on TV was the air pressure sucking everything out. You couldn't hear the sound. And I'm more scared of getting sucked out of that building than anything else.
So I reached in my pocket, pulled out that flashlight, shone it around the room, and gathered up a group of 6 or 7 of my co-workers. And when we got to the center intersection of those 2 crossed hallways, I had a decision to make. To my right was stairway C, which is the stairway I was in charge of as a fire marshal. Stairway B was ahead of me, and stairway A was to my left. With the instinct that I would turn to the right, to the stairway I knew, I felt this push on my shoulder. And there was nobody there, but it was like there was this motion that pushed me to the left. So I went to stairway A and started down. I'd not been in that stairway before. I only knew stairway C, but they're similarly constructed. From 84, we went down only to the 81st floor, 3 floors.
And I'm trying to push all the debris one away from me, realizing that I'm covered up to my shoulder. And I started to scream, "Lord, I don't want to die. Please, Lord, send somebody, anybody."
With my flashlight, I was shining from face to face But then suddenly I heard a banging noise inside 81. Help, help, I'm buried. Is anyone there? I can't breathe. The stranger's voice is screaming for help.
And that split second, somebody heard that voice. And at the other end of the floor, the person had a flashlight shining all around him like this.
Well, I then realized that there was somebody trapped in there somehow, and I grabbed the fellow beside me by the left shoulder, a co-worker of mine, Ron DiFrancesco. And I said, Ron, come on, we got to get this guy. Now, for the first time, we're encountering smoke. And as we approached this stranger, right beside me, Ron was completely overcome with smoke. He just like this, he couldn't breathe. He turned around and he went back to the stairs and he went up. The stranger is screaming, I can't breathe. And I noted at that time, for me, probably the most significant, obvious miracle, if you like, of the day. Around me was a bubble of fresh air. I was breathing normally, and I took 2 seconds to really notice this.
And I don't know why God would choose to answer some people as soon as they called out. And some people would have to wait years to have an answer. What I can tell you that I called, he heard, and he intervened, and he sent my guardian angel. And I started to crawl. I crawled the entire length of the loans department through the lounge, into the computer room, into the communication room. And one lousy sheetrock wall stood firm.
I continued on with my flashlight, and then suddenly I focused just a yard away on this hand waving in front of me down near the floor. And then I shone the light down the arm, and there I saw 2 eyes looking up at me, sort of poking his head through this hole with his arm coming out, waving like this, was this stranger. And his first words to me were, Hallelujah, I've been saved. One thing I got to know, do you know Jesus Christ? Well, this was a strange thing to come at me in the midst of this, and I stammered out almost like Peter in denial. I stammered out a very weak, I go to church every Sunday. That was the best I could do. So I started removing a lot of debris, and I stood a desk up or something up and stood up on it, looked down into the hole, and said to this stranger, I said, the only way out of here is for you to come up and over. And I was really about 9 feet in the air looking down into this pit, if you like.
And I knew this was my definite moment. Lord, why did you bring me here to leave me to die?
I said, you must do this.
I said, Lord, just give me that strength one time more. I don't want to die. And I remembered I made a fist as tightly as I could. And I punched with all the strength that I could muster. And my hand went straight through that sheetrock wall. And I punched like crazy. The hole got bigger and I stuck my head.
Up he came, I grabbed him.
And Brian, with one fluid motion, I don't know how he did it.
Nonetheless, I heaved him up. Back we went, we fell on my back.
We rolled down a couple of flights of stairs. And he got up, all composed. He says, Brian Clark. And I said, Stanley Premnan.
And as we stood up, dusting ourselves off, I said, I don't have any siblings. I said, I'll be your brother for life. Stanley had a puncture wound on his left palm. I had a puncture wound on my right palm from removing debris. And I know it's not this kind of thing you do in this day and age, but nonetheless, at that time, I said, in fact, we'll be blood brothers for life. And I smushed our hands together. Strange happenings, I don't know.
And he put his hand around my shoulder and he says, come on, buddy, let's go home.
Was it mere coincidence that the only desk left standing was the one that held Stanley's Bible? And what was it that led Brian to the stairway he never used? The stairway that would mean life for Stanley against all odds. And now we travel to a country over 5,000 miles from the terrorist attack of 9/11, a country of vast rocky outcrops and bustling markets. A country where Roman ruins stand, broken icons of the past, where houses built from golden sandstone cover the hillsides, looking as though they grew from the rock itself, where pillars from a time past rub shoulders with a mosque used every day. The pillars still reaching for the sky, though they now hold up nothing. Here we find a couple, Sherry and Seth Mandel, who migrated to the Holy Lands from America in search of their own roots, but ended up losing the life of their 13-year-old son, Kobe, who was stoned to death in the Judean mountains.
This is my husband, Seth Mandel. We came to Israel 13 years ago. We were living in Washington, outside of Washington, D.C. In America, we worked, my husband was a rabbi, and I worked as a writer and teaching writing.
Well, we had lived in Israel before we made formal aliyah, immigrated. So for me, it was a coming home. For many Jews, to arrive in Israel, whether you have been here or not, it feels like you are in a place that you have been before. So I was very excited. I felt that we came here for reasons of personal identity and personal spirituality. I felt that the connection to God is much stronger here in Israel than it is in America.
We came to Israel, we had 4 children. Even Kobe, our oldest son, he was murdered when he was 13.
There was a knock on our front door at 7:30 in the morning, and it was a boy named Yosef Ishran. He walked in the door and he said, "I came to get Kobe to go to school." I said, "He's in his room, you can go in and wake him up and maybe he'll make it to school on time for a change." They left about 5 minutes later, dressed the same, blue jeans, backpacks, sweatshirts. Kobe was wearing a cap. And they turned around and said, "Lihitarot," which means see you later, and walked out the door. Instead of going to school, first they went to the local store and bought some provisions, some pita bread and some cheese and some tomatoes, and then they walked around the outside of the community so that people wouldn't see them, because it's such a small community that if someone saw 2 boys of school age walking around after the bus left, they would stop them and say, "Why are you here? Why aren't you going to school?" And they walked down a long steep path to a place that is a canyon that begins about 500 yards, or perhaps a little less, from where we sit right now. This canyon is a place where children in Toccoa had been playing for the previous 25 years. It was like their backyard. And they set out to explore the canyon, to see some places that they hadn't been, that their friends had told them about. Sometime around 10 o'clock in the morning, according to the police, they were trapped by 4 or 5 Palestinian terrorists in a small cave and beaten to death with boulders the size of bowling balls. It was a very brutal crime. The blood of the boys was smeared on the walls. Yosef had the flesh of his attackers underneath his fingernails. And they were covered with rocks and stones so that they would be hidden. We didn't really know anything about it. We went through a regular day. Sherry went to Jerusalem. I stayed here and worked in the home. And at a certain point, we turned to each other and said, "Is Kobe supposed to be home?" We began to ask his friends to look around for him. Finally, around 9 o'clock at night, or before 8 o'clock at night, we called the police. They arrived, and they woke up Kobe's friends, who had told us that they didn't know where they were, that maybe they had gone to Jerusalem, and they told them that they had gone down into this canyon. At that point, the search parties came out. They searched all night and didn't find them until dawn, because they were covered with these boulders. And at a certain point, they came to me and said, "Did I want to see the body?" And I thought to myself, well, no. But I know that if I look at the body, I may regret it. But if I don't look at the body, I will always regret it. And I walked over and I kicked the chair. And I said to myself, what I really want to do now, and that I want to take my wife and the rest of my children, go to the airport, take everybody back to America, and never see this country again. And then I thought to myself, unfortunately, that would be against everything that I believe in. And I said, we're going to get through this because we have 3 other children. And we're not going to let the people who killed Kobe destroy their lives as well.
Let me add something.
Sure.
And also, with the political situation, we wouldn't let people talk about politics in the house because we felt that it was very easy for people to get very excited politically and in a way take our pain away because they would focus only on, the enemy. Or we felt that we could take the cruelty of Kobe's murder and transform it into kindness, and that they don't win. The terrorists don't win. We had to find a way to keep Kobe's spirit alive. That's how we felt, that he was dead, his body was dead, but that we weren't going to let his spirit die, and that we were going to take him with us, and that in a way we had to be bigger vessels to be able to bring him with us.
You have seen firsthand the triumph of the human spirit. You have seen fate move as people are led to each other and strangers become brothers. You have seen courage standing strong through unimaginable pain, and you have seen the power in acting with truth when falsehood is revealed. We are adaptable, we human beings, and that is necessary and wonderful, and it enables life to be lived. But this very adaptation that is so useful is often the very thing that enables suffering and poverty and pain. In time, it makes terrible things seem less terrible, almost acceptable. Just the way things are. Habit is a very dangerous thing.
Many people today are saying, we cannot continue like this. Nature can't continue like this. There comes a war, and we have to say, there must be a change.
What we accept as right and true and good changes with the age we're living in, and the country, and the politics. Things we consider fundamental and eternal often change. They give way, eroded by time. Given enough time, we often revise what is acceptable to match the changes in our circumstances. Deprive a group of people of power for long enough, and they begin to believe that being powerless is just the way things are meant to be. Deprive them of food for long enough, and hungry becomes normal and just the way it's supposed to be. Deprive them of freedom, and they will end up embracing their chains. They know them. They're familiar. Often, that's preferable to the fear of the unknown, of something that could be so much worse. Once people accept injustices as a normal part of their lives, asking them to see differently is like asking a colorblind person to paint a house. And what happens when, in spite of pain and suffering, in spite of deprivation and deep sorrow, people are brave enough and strong enough to survive? What happens when they walk back into a reasonable life after living through things that are almost unimaginable? What then? What of the mind and the spirit? Do they survive intact? Can these people even function in the normal world after seeing humanity at its lowest and after living through horrors not meant, surely never meant for anyone to have to go through?
And what is impressive is that people are resilient. It is really quite an affirmation of the human spirit, that despite the fact that their homes are crumbling, that they have lost all their clothing and their home, and even lost their loved ones, and the pain is so great that there is still the strength of the human spirit inside who really wants to survive.
How can we even begin to understand the mental state of someone who has survived the worst? Do they ever trust again?
It's very difficult to trust anybody around you at that time because you don't know what their motives are, you don't know what their capacity is, you don't know what their feelings are. And I think at that moment, to turn inwards and to be able to trust God and to trust that God's protection is with me so that I can move on further in my life.
Do they feel as though God or some malevolent fate has pointed a finger at them personally, singled them out for punishment?
If they feel that God or spirit or fate is in control of what happens, then I have to trust in the environment or in the spirit that I believe in, that this is what was meant to happen, and see where I now am guided to go. So it's a totally different kind of helping and facilitating that person depending on how they feel.
Do they feel unworthy of life or blessed and saved by some kind of power?
When that plane hit the building, the first thought that came to mind was, God, these Japanese folks were cruel to leave me here to die, not realizing that they all died and left me. And I knew that the only person who was there with me at that time was God.
Uomini fraterni.
When we are able to open our heart, then we experiment God with a lot of joy and a lot of happiness. But when it doesn't happen, due to our limits, we feel bitterness inside.
So often we compare the way we feel inside with the way others look outside. We keep ourselves isolated from humanity by imagining that everyone else feels fine, that everything is all right for everyone else because that's how they look outside. It makes us feel alone. We forget that we too walk around and function as though everything is fine when our lives are falling apart. We forget that we too smile when we are broken. It isn't outside where the hurt is. Outside is the face the world sees. So many people have lived through the unimaginable, and yet they walk around like they're fine, like they're just like everyone else.
In fact, if you truly examine, you will find that we are all traumatized. We are all wounded souls pretending that we are okay.
But wounds of the spirit hide inside. They hide behind faces that still smile, faces that look normal. But inside is where the tears are. Inside where the pain is. Inside where the question why still sits, making a wound of its own. Psychologists have discovered that a chemical reaction occurs in the bodies of those who have lived through severe shock. What kind of toll does that take? And do they come out determined to hold out the hand of care to the fellow human beings? Or has humanity been stripped from them?
After I've been through a crisis, I know that there can be a lot of blame and complain at that moment. But if I allow myself to go down that avenue, there'll be a lot of bitterness and hatred in my own feelings and my own life. But what I have to do is to actually pick myself up and start repairing the damage that's happened. But bitterness is going to create more damage. And so rather than allow those questions to come, why and what and if and but and blame and complain, if I can understand that this was one of the scenes of the drama of life, and I don't know what the future holds, but whatever it is that's happened is a preparation for me to be stronger, to be more compassionate, to be more loving.
It is important to know that victims can become survivors. And victims exist in every country. No place is exempt. Even here, in this country that reached out to conquer and colonize, where bright red double-decker buses carry tourists past the Houses of Parliament. Here, where Big Ben chimes while street dancers whirl and spin to exuberant music. Here too there are victims who become survivors. One example that stands up in my mind is Jo Berry. Jo is the daughter of a conservative member of parliament who was killed in the Brighton bombings in 1984. The man convicted of the killing, Patrick McGee, was imprisoned for many years. Finally, in 1998, as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, he was released. Jo Berry needed to talk to the man who planted the bomb that took her father's life. Undaunted and courageous, she went to meet him.
My focus and aim had always been to not blame, to not keep anyone as the enemy, to try to understand. And during that year, I kept on meeting people who said, "I hear you want to meet Pat. I know him. I can arrange it." And so I said, "Yeah, that's fine. Please do." And 3 times I got back a message saying that he didn't want to meet me. And that was quite hard, but I also trusted, that at the right time it would happen. And I wrote a poem called Bridges Can Be Built, and part of that poem is about meeting Pat. And I shared it at a peace conference, and someone there said, "You want to meet Pat?" I can make it happen. And I went, okay, here we go again, but yeah. And sure enough, this time he did make it happen. And I did discover that Pat was always saying yes, so I don't know how that translated to a no. And then one morning, and the phone rang, and someone, my friend Anne, said, Pat's coming to my house tonight. Will you be there? And my first thought was, I'm not ready, I'm not feeling inspired, I'm not even caring about peace, I'm just feeling very mundane, you know. And then I thought, well, maybe I can trust. And I thought, I can do it. But I was terrified, and I remember him walking in the room, and I got up and I shook his hand and said, thank you for coming. And he went, no, I want to thank you. And straight away we started talking. And at the beginning, Pat was justifying his sort of political position and giving me the political reasons of why it had been a good strategy. And I was listening and asking lots of questions. And my aim was to help him to open up, to look at sort of, you know, the deepest reasons of why he'd chosen violence, and just to see him as a human being. And then something happened, and he stopped talking, and he took off his glasses and he rubbed his eyes and he said, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to say. I've never met someone like you, so how can I help? I want to hear your anger and your rage, you know, and your pain. I want to be there for you. And in that moment I could see he'd taken off the political hat and he'd opened up, become a real human being. And part of me wanted to flee, wanted to leave the room, because this was more than I'd bargained for and it was very scary. And part of me embraced it and wanted it because I knew it was another journey and that he had a similar need to engage with me as I did with him. And we were going to journey together. And I got up and actually hugged him and I said, thank you. And he went, I'm really sorry I killed your father. And I said, I'm glad it's you. And we left the room. And he didn't know what I meant and I didn't know what I meant, but what I did mean was I was glad it was him, because he was so prepared to engage with me on those real human vulnerable levels. You know, and many wouldn't. I'm always asked about forgiveness, you know, have I forgiven Pat and have I reached sort of like a conclusion? I now can empathise with Pat so much that I know if I'd lived his life, I may have made the same choices. There is nothing to forgive. It's not about forgiveness, it's just about understanding, you know, because I could have been him. And that to me is a very powerful realization.
There is nothing that strikes the heart harder than the death of someone we love, especially when it's by the hand of another human being. As Gandhi said, forgiveness is an attribute of the strong. To go deep inside and to find the strength to forgive is an act of moral courage. Courage sometimes can't see the road ahead, but Jo Berry walked forward on that road anyway, and she held out her hand, and the world became a little better. We have walked a little way into the lives of some extraordinary, ordinary people. People who have delved into the deepest recesses of their being to find the strength, to find the courage. For though people through the ages have retreated to the depths of ancient caves, searching in the dark, or walked in the scorching sun through valleys, searching in the light, though they have made their way through the very rock of life itself, the only way to find this kind of inner strength is to look inside. No matter who we are, there is no other way. And is this inner strength, no matter where it comes from, something that only some people are blessed with? Or do we all have it if we're pushed far enough, if we reach deep enough?
The free spirit in me actually died in that bomb as well. Now, my truth was that people killed people for political reasons. And what I discovered at the end of this, it was almost like a wall of tears, was this absolute knowing that there is no one to betray. There is no enemy.
Is the resilience of the human spirit part of the equation? Or faith in humanity? Or faith in a higher power?
When there's faith, faith in any religion, any tradition, the power of faith is something that's incredibly healing. Whatever it is I believe in, whoever it is I believe in, that faith is something that's going to give me an inner strength and a capacity to be able to deal with everything and move on.
And I remember the newscaster saying 911 is an emergency number. In September, spelled with 9 letters. And I says, Jen, can you bring me my Bible? The preacher man, he's saying all the answers you can find in the Bible. Well, I gotta find 911 in the Bible. And I'm flipping the pages and I saw Psalm 91 verse 1. I'm like, God, this is 911 right there. And I'm reading, and this is what it says in the first verse in the King James Version. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And I'm reading down towards verse 15, it says, and he shall call upon me, and I will hear, will be with him in trouble.
Or is it finally, when the human will is not enough? Is it when we give up? Is it then, in the most extreme times, when the soul reaches out to a higher power?
My answer to that is, it comes down to your own sheer belief system. If you lost everything, including the closest element in your life, your family, your own family, if you believe that there is something up there, the Creator, then you are empowered. Then that could give you the energy to continue with life, with your own life.
But remember what we've just seen. Would this always be enough? Sometimes it is, but let's be realistic. The only one we can count on always being there is us, our own selves. We know, don't we? Deep inside, we know that we may be alone, far from anyone we know, in places unfamiliar to the senses, unfamiliar to the heart. What then?
The universe basically doesn't like delays. You don't delay things. You make them happen now. So if you are feeling down, if you feel that the powers of the mind abandoned you, there's no such thing. Under God, there's no end. Everything is possible and anything is possible. You are the architect of your life. You create your own reality. Therefore, you are the master of your mind. You become the trigger for your own psyche, an enabler to your own consciousness. That's where it's all lying. You have it yourself. That is the secret.
It's heartening to see the triumph of the people we've seen. But it's made me think about myself and wonder, honestly, would I triumph in the same situation? They had an inner strength that is admirable, awe-inspiring. But to be honest, I don't know if I have it. I don't know how I would survive in any of these circumstances, in any of these situations. Do you? Honestly. When human beings need to look to something more powerful, when they look for something to uplift and comfort, it is then that they fill the churches. It is then that they fill the mosques and temples. Then that they kneel before the altars and worship at the shrines. For these places, built from love, are built to hold the light of the divine. These places are where we celebrate in times of joy and where we ask for help in times of need. In the very building of them, humanity acknowledges that there is something greater, something more powerful. But no matter how beautiful it is, or how often it is filled with people, no place of worship is ever enough without what is added by us.
So although the conditions are pretty drastic, but the positive impact of that has been a greater higher awareness, a heightened consciousness, and an understanding that human beings are responsible for everything that's happening, and we have to bring about change in ourselves.
It seems that for all of us, the only way to prepare for the future, for anything, is to go deep inside and find ourselves, our real selves. We need to empower ourselves. We need to be able to recognize our own inner strength and to reach it in times of crisis. We need to find our light.
Take a deep breath in and let it out, allowing your body to relax, enjoying the feeling of peace that is growing from within. Take in another deep breath as you invite God to be with you, and let it out as you release any feelings of being not good enough. As you continue to relax, let a question form in your mind about something in your life that is concerning you at the moment. Perhaps a situation that is troubling you. Perhaps a relationship that is in conflict. An issue for which you require clarity. A problem which you would like to solve. Something you feel guilty about. Or perhaps a challenge facing you. Take a moment to bring your question into focus so that you can see it for what it is. Knowing that there is always a solution, you relax even more. You are a soul on a journey through life, and situations and circumstances come to teach you, come to make you strong. Your source of strength and guidance is God, the all-powerful and wise one, your teacher, your guide. You are seeking solutions, and you will find what you seek. As clearly as you can, present your question to God through thoughts, feelings, pictures in your mind. Now, ask to be shown or told what spiritual power or virtue will help you resolve your question. It may be that you require courage or patience, the power to let go, or the power to tolerate. You may need to forgive, or be determined, or honest. With faith and trust in who you are with, and knowing that the solution may not be what you expected, relax and allow your answer to become clear to you now. Remembering that you can only change yourself, not other people. It's okay to be uncertain of what this answer means, and trust that something will come of it. Now is the time to strengthen this power or virtue in you. Refocus your mind on the bright star in front of you. Let God fill you with the power, the virtue. All you have to do is receive it, absorb it. Be open to God's energy, strengthening your own powers and virtues. With this energy from God, what was difficult before becomes easier. I will use this spiritual solution. And feel a sense of optimism as you watch for something new to unfold in your life.
I hope we have found answers here as we've listened to people who have faced the ultimate in suffering or degradation or sorrow and survived.
The answer lies in a click of humanity, a click of intelligence, and a click of spirituality.
Being receptive to a much greater intelligence than ourselves and asking how we can be useful.
Because life is not about remaining stagnant. Life is about getting up and going forward and do the right thing.
There's no question that a person's spirit and their soul is what really can carry them through a disaster.
You know, rather than being a human with a spiritual dimension, you know, we're all spiritual entities with a momentary human dimension.
But while we may be inspired and determined to find our own inner strength, well, I'm standing comfortably in a studio, talking to you, and you're in a theater watching me and them. All the watching in the world won't do it. You've seen what I've seen. You've heard what I've heard. Can you do it? And if you can, will you? This is a choice we each must make for ourselves. But no matter what we choose, we should remember, the time is short. The time is crucial. The time is now.
The time is now.
Time is now.
The time is now.
The time is now.
The time is now.
The time is now.
It has to be now. The time is now.
To watch Peace of Mind channel videos on YouTube, subscribe us on youtube.com/tvpeaceofmind. Just a click for a peaceful life.